A couple of days ago, I was in the Build Brighton workshop using the laser cutter, and when I finished doing what I was doing, I decided to have a play around with trying to make some curved kind of corners within wood. And this is the process where you kind of cut lots of slits in the wood, enough for it to kind of bend around. It's something that's been done for ages by lots of different people, but I fancy kind of giving it a go. And so I started out just experimenting really with some kind of fairly broad, large cuts, kind of getting down to something a little bit deeper, kind of narrow, then a bit more, and eventually to kind of this, which is quite a fine pitch, quite a good sequence, and it just about works. And I'm going to revise that a little bit further and ended up with this kind of pattern here, which bends to a pretty decent degree. You can get a quite tight curve out of that. And so, I mean, it's an interesting kind of technique. I've seen it used before for kind of making corners on boxes, things like that. It's quite interesting, but I didn't have any real use for it at the time. But the other day, I was in a kind of shop and I spotted one of these little kind of old-fashioned style music box things. And so it could be quite cute to make a little box for this. And so I kind of came up with a rough design, a little kind of curved lid, flat base, solid sides, and it would sit within there. And so I've been experimenting this evening. The design went fairly well. This is the core piece of it, the lid, which kind of bent around, and that worked well. But I didn't get the radiuses quite right, so my side pieces didn't fit properly. So a little bit of trial and error later, and quite a few offcuts later, I came up with a finished set. This is the design I came up with. These are the pieces that make up design. I've gone for kind of an interlocking edge all the way around. I mean, for a couple of reasons. I think it looks quite nice when it locks together, and it also adds a lot of kind of a structural integrity to it. You've got far more kind of points to kind of glue and secure it. It also helps with alignment as well, so you're not trying to kind of work out where it goes that way around. It's just there. That's where it fits. And so the design got here wraps around like so. So you then get a little compartment with inside, little music box, and then sits in there. The sides are just kind of locked on the base. Again, that was partly for kind of trial and error reasons, and I thought about putting a few on this top face here, but in the end this kind of worked quite well. And so that kind of tucks in neatly like so. All I've got to do now is glue it. With the bending of the wood, the design that I kind of came up with, or kind of came to, and that worked well for me, was if you imagine it, a total kind of 20mm segment. You've got 3mm of that is solid wood, and then 17 is cut. And then obviously that is kind of offset for the next time around, next one through. And this design here, there's a 2mm kind of gap between each line. And this is allowing me to do some fairly tight curves, and this roughly goes around to a complete circle. So, and yet it's still very strong. It hasn't started to split at all. The only kind of damage, or the only splitting I found so far, was on one of these pieces here, where almost all of the bend tended to be within this top few rows here. As you can see how they've started to split open. I mean, to be honest, even then it didn't go anywhere. Might be the kind of quirks of the particular MDF that's being used, but it's remarkably strong. I was planning on using wood glue to kind of attach these pieces together. It seemed like the most appropriate thing to do, and when it kind of sets, it's very, very tough. Unfortunately, it does take quite some time to set, and some of these bits obviously are under tension, these bends, and so I would have needed to kind of get everything perfectly positioned in place and kind of secure it somehow, or make some kind of jig to hold it. So I've opted for super glue. I tried it out here using some of the offcuts. And it seems to go together really well. Each piece takes a couple of minutes to dry and set. It's strong, it's tough, it's holding. It doesn't seem to kind of be giving away. So now that's kind of in place. I started using that method for the proper one, using all the kind of valid parts. The two sides are in place. Obviously with this one, I will need to attach this in at some point. This particular mechanism's got kind of three 3mm kind of mounting points on the bottom. It's quite extreme. I'm guessing that helps if you can kind of bolt it to a solid base, then the sound will kind of resonate through, giving you much louder noise. I think in my case it would have meant kind of getting to using these mounting points. It would have meant kind of exact measurements, alignments, kind of getting it cut through, and then ideally kind of countersinking and pointing through, and with only 3mm piece of wood it wasn't really going to happen. So for this, I think I'm just going to use some hot glue and secure that in place now before I start to fold the top piece over. With these end tabs, I'm trying to make sure I get as much of the surface area covered in glue as possible. So we've got each side of this kind of makes contact and touches, and so there's a lot of opportunity to kind of glue it to make sure it's secured. And at these ends, they're under a significant amount of pressure trying to kind of force their way out. So it's just a case of holding this in place for a minute or two until everything sets. As in this design here, it doesn't kind of come down straight, it comes down at an angle. So I need to make sure I hold it in at that angle, so when the rest of it goes on, it's correct. I've secured the top and obviously the first side here. I'm about to close this up now. You can see the mechanism is kind of glued inside. It's turned out to be a pretty tight fit. It's meant to have a reasonable amount of clearance, or just enough clearance all the way around. And it's come out quite nicely. Just going to glue the final bit in and hopefully this should be finished. So there we have it. A nice little kind of one evening project. It kind of makes use of a new kind of cutting technique or bending technique for the laser cut wood. I can now see why they had the kind of quite intensive kind of mounting options on the actual music box. If you place it onto a flat surface and try again, you can hear how much louder it is. Clearly in the kind of products these things were designed for, it's going to get a lot of its volume from the actual surface or the chassis or whatever it is. Obviously in the original design, or the design I made for this, I put in kind of little holes in the top. I wanted to go for a more interesting kind of geometric pattern, but unfortunately that wasn't available within the package I was using, the software package, so I just put in some random holes. In reality, I really wouldn't have needed to have done that. I mean, clearly the sound comes from the fact that it's resonating on the surface. The whole thing becomes a speaker of sorts, so these holes would be kind of pretty redundant. So there you go, quick little music box.